and welcome to our Bible study, We Make the Road by Walking, by Brian McLaren. Today we're going to talk about two different chapters that are in section 2, Alive in the Adventure of Jesus. We're getting ready for Advent, and so we want to have a little bit of talk about Advent. Advent is about preparation, it's about getting ready, it's about welcoming Jesus. And so we start in chapter 14 with some prophecies by Daniel. I'm going to pause here if you want to read Daniel chapter 7, verses 9 through 28. Go ahead and then come back. Did you do that? Now, for some of us, this is the first time we've ever read Daniel, and it can be a little trippy. There are so many questions in this passage. A lot of things came up in our on-person Bible study, and I'm going to write some of that in the part of the Bible study message. So check that out if you haven't already. But the main point that Daniel is trying to say here is that the prophets in the Bible have this really important role. They're the custodians of the best hopes, dreams, and desires of the people. They're challenging people to act in ways consistent with that hope. Prophets are not fortune tellers, and they're not talking about wishes or magic wands. A wish is great, but it can't really happen. A hope is based in the truth of God's promises. A desire or a dream is based on God's promise yet to come. And so this prophecy in Daniel is one of the first prophecies that's telling us that Jesus, the Messiah, would come. Well, we know the end of the story because we're reading the whole Bible this year. But at that time, the book of Daniel and then the New Testament when Jesus was born was over 500 years. A lot of people were trying to hold on to those dreams, but it just felt like they weren't going to happen. The people were really struggling to figure out if that Messiah was ever going to come. And so Brian reminds us in chapter 14 that to be alive in the adventure of Jesus is to have a dream or a hope for the future. And it's to translate that hope for the future into a present action, no matter the disappointment, no matter the delays. It really matters. We're going to ask in the conversation, you might want to share a time when you lost hope or a time when you received hope. Now remember, that prophecy happened, and just like today, lots of people gathered in church every week to reread the prophecies and talk about what God was up to in their world. For 5 centuries, priests went into the temple in Jerusalem, and Zechariah was one of those priests. During the time of Caesar Augustus and Herod, Zechariah went into the Holy of Holies, and an angel actually came and talked to him. And this, of course, is crazy, right? I know it's the Bible, but even then, people thought it was pretty crazy for an angel to show up and chat with you. Like, it happened. And so chapter 15 tells us about the audacity of 2 women who get angel visitors. Remember, these women had heard the prophecies for years. They knew the Messiah was coming, but they also knew that they'd been waiting 5 centuries, and it was really hard to hold on to that hope. In the midst of that world, these angels show up, first to Zechariah and Elizabeth, promising that they will have a son who's going to be named John the Baptist, and then to Mary, telling her she'll have a son named Jesus. These stories sound pretty fantastical, but the point behind them is to remind us that we can also dare to hope. We, like Elizabeth and Mary, can believe that the impossible is possible, for nothing is impossible with God. Now, you and I, we may not be pregnant with hope during this Advent season, but one of the reasons that we gather together in these Bible studies, we gather together at church, we reread these prophecies, is because God is telling us over and over again, we each have the capacity to give birth to something beautiful and good and needed and wonderful. We have that capacity because God is in us. God brings forth that creativity in us. In the chapter, in the Gospel of Luke, Luke's telling of the Christ story, of the birth of Jesus, is where God is aligned with the creative, feminine power of womanhood, not masculine power of hate and statehood. It's a really important part of how the Holy Spirit works through us to bring God's creative power. So, how can you dare to believe the impossible? By surrendering yourself to God, by cooperating with God's creative, pregnant power. How are you a part of that hope and promise? Let's talk about it.